Welcome to the Hockey Podcast. I am Luke Lipinski.
And I'm Doug Cannon.
On this week's show, we look at a developing situation in Tampa, Ilya Bryzgalov's triumphant return, and a countdown to 24/7.
We will also pause and ponder the question, do we really need an Olympic break? We say, we being Luke and I, and the commissioner, bring back the World Cup of Hockey.
All that and quite possibly more. Let's drop the puck on episode 24. Episode 24 is here. Luke Lipinski alongside Doug Cannon. Doug, how you doing today?
I'm doing good, Luke. How are you?
I'm good. Episode 24.
I'm a little tired, but I'm doing good.
That usually makes for the best show, at least from my perspective. Maybe
a little
not
tired, a little stiff, long drive down from Flagstaff to the Valley.
Where there was some hockey taking place.
Lots of hockey. Lots of hockey.
Pre-show prep.
Sub-freezing weather, too.
That's why I don't go up there.
It was pretty cold up there.
Like it here, where it's nice and 90.
And the rink, you could see your breath. Yeah, it was like, you're sitting there holding a cup of coffee, watching some youth hockey.
Never
it was
great.
It was great. No, I loved every minute of it.
Number 24, I'm going to say the best number 24 in NHL history is Chris Chelios. Guy played till he was 73 years old.
Yeah, that's true, too.
He does not look like a guy you would ever want to mess with.
No.
Number 24, here's another funny thing about the number 24. Tampa Bay Lightning have 24 points. They're first place in the Eastern Conference. 8 teams have 24 points at least in the Western Conference. So just let that sink in for a second.
The Western Conference is a darn good conference.
The top team in the East would be tied for 8th in the West. Now, I know it's still early. I know that's going to change. And I know that teams like Pittsburgh and Boston and even New York is picking up some steam. There's going to be teams that move up, and it's not going to stay this way all year. But that's really amazing, especially because there's less teams in the West.
Mm-hmm.
And yet you have 8 of them that would be in first in the Eastern Conference. And it's not like they all have 24 points. I mean, Anaheim's got, 29? 31. Colorado, Chicago have 28. St. Louis has 24. Phoenix has 26. San Jose has 25. Vancouver, Minnesota each have 24 as well. Top team in the East has 24. Unfortunately, that top team in the East happens to be Tampa Bay, and that's where we have to start the show.
Yeah, it's really bad news if you're a Tampa Bay fan.
Even if you're just a hockey fan.
If you're a hockey fan, number 1 in points.
Number 1 in goals.
Number 1 in goals.
Number 1 pick a couple years ago, and he's lived up to it.
We're talking about Steven Stamkos.
Yeah, the conversation I had with somebody a couple days ago that doesn't necessarily follow hockey was teams don't usually miss with the number 1 pick in the NHL. Like I started to go back these last few. There's obviously some, but you look the last couple. I mean, Steven Stamkos was one that was a number 1 pick. Sidney Crosby, Alex Ovechkin a couple years before that. Like the best players are usually taken number 1. John Tavares, I think the year after Stamkos, a couple years after Stamkos. Steven Stamkos came into the league 2008. 222 goals already in 389 games. I mean, the guy just scores. 60 goals a couple years ago, 51 a couple years before that. But we don't know when he's going to be playing again.
Well, we don't know what's wrong with him. We know we've both seen the highlight of he was on a back check and he ran into the post and his right leg?
Right leg, yeah.
His shin hit the post.
Yeah.
And it hit hard.
They're saying
TSN is reporting a broken tibia.
And then other people are speculating. And this, we should note, just happened, like within the last couple hours of when we're recording this.
Yeah, and Steve Yzerman, general manager for Tampa, is like, no. He's denying the TSN report. And he's the GM. He's got to deny it because they don't know yet. He is staying in the hospital overnight, though.
Yeah, it's just not a good-looking play. I mean, this tells you all you need to know about Steven Stamkos. He's a star in this league because he scores goals, but he came to back-to-back check for his team.
Like, hard back check, not just I'm going to try to catch this guy. He was making sure that guy didn't get to the net.
Yeah, not just I'm going to make sure I show up in the camera frame so they think I'm back checking, but I'm not really. I mean, he gets hit into the post. That's how far back he was back checking.
And losing a guy like Steven Stamkos, it's not just so much his scoring ability. It's also he makes the team better because he also dishes out assists. He's the leading points guy in the NHL because of goals, but he also dishes the puck around.
He makes that top line great. I mean, as much as Martin St. Louis is an excellent player, and he's certainly proven his worth in this league, his numbers are going to go down without Steven Stamkos to A, pass the puck to, or B, to take all the attention away from him. I mean, now Martin St. Louis, what made him so great the last couple of years is he is not the guy that other teams are keying on. He's your second option. Mm-hmm. Now he's your only option, and it's unfortunate for a lot of reasons. First of all, if it really is a broken tibia, they're speculating he could be out 3 to 6 months, which is horrible for Tampa, who's, as I just said, is in first in the Eastern Conference. They won't be without him. I like to see teams like that from non-traditional markets have success.
Right.
I was really happy when Tampa won the Stanley Cup, whatever that was 9 years ago. He's one of the players that you want to watch. Personally, selfishly, I'm upset because I wanted to see him play here in person in 5 days.
Yeah, I mean, he's coming to Phoenix, and that was the great thing of the whole realignment and the scheduling this year was the fact that every city gets to see the opposing conference twice.
Yeah.
So we get to see Tampa here, and we're not flying to Tampa, but we'll be able to watch that game on television. And so fans in the Phoenix area, which is where this podcast originates from, get to see guys like this past Saturday, they got to watch Ovechkin play.
And I was worried because he had been hurt. He missed a few games before that. I mean, I want to see him play.
Right.
And Stamkos, it's not a guy you get to see play in person very often. Look, the casual sports fan that looks at hockey knows Sidney Crosby and they know Alex Ovechkin.
Mm-hmm.
Steven Stamkos is right there. He's right there.
But he's in Tampa.
He is in Tampa, and Crosby and Ovechkin had that rivalry thing going. And, Crosby, at least in my opinion, has separated himself as the best player in the world. Ovechkin has that flair that everybody knows him. Stamkos is, I guess, unfortunately, kind of a distant third. But I mean, if I'm picking all the players in the NHL, Stamkos is one of the very top ones I'm taking.
Oh, he's right. I think he's one of the best. And, again, he's in a market where he's not going to get that attention. If he did, I mean, you look at the rosters that have surrounded Steven Stamkos over his years in Tampa, he just produces and produces and produces. Put him in a marketplace like Toronto or New York or L.A., everybody knows his name.
But I like him in Tampa because you figure if they surround him with talent, eventually they're going to make a push to the Stanley Cup because he's that sort of guy that could carry you through the playoffs.
Well, he's done it once before.
Yeah. And again, I just go back to his goal totals. I mean, he came in as an 18-year-old and put up 23 goals, 23 assists, then 51, 45, 60, 29 last year. These are just goals. These aren't points. These are goals.
Right, just goals.
29 points last year in 48 games, and he already had 14 goals in 16 games this year. So it's a bad loss for Tampa Bay. It's the worst for them. It's a bad loss for hockey fans in general, and
I think it's bad news for the league.
It is. It's also bad news for Team Canada because they got to make their decision. Again, we don't know the extent of the injury, but they have to finalize a 23-man roster by the end of next month, so the end of December. So they've got time, but if there's even a chance that he might be healthy, let's say it isn't a broken tibia and he could be back by February, how do you leave him off the roster?
You don't, but then you also have to take in place what is the injury when we finally discover what the injury is, how long is the healing time, and then how long is it going to take him to get back into shape, depending on how long he's out.
Yeah.
So Team Canada might not have Steven Stamkos. Wow.
Which, you look at Canada and you say, okay, they're so loaded they can absorb it, and that's true. They can absorb it up front. They've got plenty of guys. I mean, it's ridiculous, the forwards they have. However, it's somebody you want to watch play in the Olympics. And there's no team out there, even Canada with all that talent, that doesn't get worse if they lose Steven Stamkos.
Steven Stamkos wants to play.
Yep.
I watched that highlight just before we wrap up here, but I watched that highlight. That dude tried to stand up.
He did. Not only did he try to stand up, he tried to skate off the ice.
And, I mean, you clearly see he was in pain, and he still tried to get up on his own without anybody helping him to skate to the bench. Going, I just bruised my shin or something.
Remember Carlson last year with the severed Achilles made it to the bench?
Yes.
On one skate. He just hopped there. Like, that is unreal to me.
That defines a hockey player.
You're listening to The Hockey Podcast. Feel free to email comments or questions to the show at our email address, thehockeypodcast@gmail.com.
Segment 2, we were just talking about the Olympics, the possible impact on Team Canada.
Yeah, but I got to stop you right there. You asked me a question when the show started.
I did?
Yeah.
I don't remember it. That was a while ago. That was at least 8 minutes ago.
Chris Chelios.
Not the best number 24?
No, I got one better.
Okay.
Don Cherry.
Chelios.
For 33 games in the WHL, which really isn't the NHL.
Shocking that you would go Canadian and I would go American. That's a real surprise. Well, Canadian
That was a stretch, I know, but I had to bring it up.
hockey and American hockey will square off in February.
February.
And that will be the Olympics, and it will continue to happen every 4 years, but NHL players might not be there every 4 years.
Right. Commissioner Bettman's, he's been pretty vocal about he doesn't feel real good about his season stopping. Players going overseas or staying in North America to play for the Olympics. He's not a big fan of it. He's been I shouldn't say very vocal, but he's
vocal enough. I mean, he's the commissioner. When he talks, you listen, and if he doesn't want them to be there, they're not going to be there very long.
I mean, he doesn't get on a soapbox every time if he's in front of a camera and says, I don't want the Olympics, but I mean, it came down to the 11th hour, really, before it was a done deal, before it was decided that guys were going to Sochi.
Yeah, and the Sochi one's interesting because you had guys like Alex Ovechkin, even a couple years ago, I remember, coming out and saying, I'm playing for my home country, in my home country. I mean, it works out that much better if you're on Russia. You want to play in your own country, and a guy like Alex Ovechkin says, I'm going to do it no matter what, so what are you going to do, suspend me?
Right.
There was that sort of pressure leading up to this one. It's in Russia. It's in Sochi. There's going to be NHL players, but after that, I mean, like you said, Bettman said this before, and he said again recently that he prefers a World Cup to sending NHL players to the Olympics. And
I'm with the commissioner on this.
I kind of am too, the more I think about it, and it really ultimately doesn't matter what you or I think, because if he feels that way, it's going to change.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that you can say about Gary Bettman is that when his mind is made up and he wants something to happen, it will happen. I remember when he first came to office, the first thing he did was he got rid of my beloved Norris division. I was pretty upset as a hockey fan.
I can see that.
I wanted my Wales and I wanted, the Campbell, and I'm a Toronto kid. I was born in Toronto, and I loved my beloved Norris division because Toronto always seemed to find the bottom of it.
They can find the bottom of a new division. That doesn't have to change.
But I kind of liked each division having its own name and the conferences being named, and it was
now you have the Metro.
But it was all, oh, geez, let's not go there again. But I mean, at least it was, the thing I love about it is that guys that play hockey respect the game. They respect the tradition of the game. That's the thing I love. I love that the most. That there's traditions, there's unwritten rules, and guys that play the game all respect that.
I would agree with that.
There's a couple of guys, Ray Emery, that kind of step outside the box, but for the most part,
I will say this. Ray Emery, we talked about this last week, an absolute disgrace what he did. But I think even Ray Emery, outside of those 2 minutes, probably because he grew up playing hockey, respects the sort of tradition and just respects the game. And I'm not saying it doesn't happen in other sports, but in hockey it is very
So that's kind of why I got upset when he went to East and West and Atlantic, Pacific and stuff like that. But, we all came to grow with it and like it. And then he changed the schedule for the better, I thought. And then, they've done it again, and they've renamed the divisions. And he's been very methodical, I think, in when he has awarded new franchises and has done things for the game. Like we said in the first segment, this game originates from Phoenix. The commissioner has been steadfast and true about keeping a franchise in this marketplace. It's the 14th largest media market in the country. Why wouldn't you want? It has 4 professional sports. The point I'm making is that the commissioner makes strong decisions, and he makes it for the betterment of the game.
I would agree. There's not many. I'm sure there are some. If you listed them all out in front of me, I mean, I'm not going to agree with everything anybody does, but for the most part, all the changes, and I've said this before on the show, the changes that the league has made, I've liked over the last 10 years, or the new things they implement. And so, bringing it back to the Olympics, I love watching the Winter Olympics.
We both do.
Specifically hockey. If NHL players aren't there, and it's great when they are there. I mean, the last time was fantastic. Even if even though Canada won, it was still a lot of fun watching that. And the players, so that's enjoyable too. And also, it does kind of bring people that everybody watches the Olympics, so now they're like, oh, I want to go see what Ryan Miller's doing. Obviously, not this year; that won't be an issue. But 4 years ago, So there's a lot of pros to it, but I get why they might want to switch it in the future. And also, like you said, I'm still going to watch it because it's not going to be nobody's playing hockey. It's just going to be the next generation of NHL players playing hockey.
Well, the strong thing about why I think the commissioner's on the right track here is because we just came out of a shortened season last year. Things are looking good this year. We got a new format. We get to see all the Eastern Conference teams home and away. We never had that luxury before. Good things are happening for this thing. We've got 6 outdoor games this year. Real good, positive things are happening around the sport that you and I love. And now the commissioner's even taking another step because typically the World Cup of Hockey is played prior to training camp. So maybe the NHLPA is saying, yeah, we really like that idea. Do we really have to have training camp now?
Well, and the NHLPA and the commissioner's office and the owners are all going to have to agree on something. So this is all kind of preliminary, but this might be the last time we see NHL players at the Olympics for quite some time. And you're right. I mean, if they're going to be playing preseason, essentially, which is another reason I like it because I get more hockey over the course of the year.
I got hockey in August.
And I think that's the main thing driving this. I think that you could look at this very casually and say, oh, he doesn't want his players on display playing for their countries or whatever. That's not the case.
That's not the case. You're playing for your country.
If he's championing a World Cup, which we saw back 2004 and we saw it in 96, and I don't know if there were more than that or not, but I do remember those, then you're still getting to do that. But I really think the issue is you're stopping the league in the middle of February, as we're going right now, for 2.5 weeks.
Right. So now we've got all this positive energy going this year, and come February 6th, 7th, for most clubs, it stops.
There's also no All-Star game this way, too.
And there's no All-Star game this year because of it. And clubs like Phoenix are going to go 22 games.
22 days.
22 days without a home game. Now, I'm a businessman. 22 days, I don't have an event in my building.
And that's one of 30 teams that doesn't have NHL hockey in their building for those 3 weeks.
That's a long time.
Now, I guess you could make the case that it ultimately evens out because it's not like you're losing games. You're still getting those 41 home games plus playoffs or whatever in your building, but they're just more condensed. I don't know. I like it the way it is.
The momentum's gone, though. I mean, you've got this big... We just said it in the first segment, and you've got Florida, Panthers and Tampa. You got Dallas. You got Phoenix. You've got... Anaheim, LA, San Jose, Nashville. You're looking at non-traditional markets.
You forgot Carolina. How dare you?
Oh, Carolina.
Okay.
Good call. But these clubs, more so than a Detroit, a Toronto, a Chicago, a Rangers, Islanders, those non-traditional markets have to advertise and market and promote their clubs twice as hard as the traditional markets to get in the fray of everyday top-of-mind sports fan, and then now you're going to stop for 22 days. That's what I think the commissioner is battling.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. That's why I get what he's doing. I like it the way it is, but I think I would totally be on board with that switch because there's a lot of reasons for it, not even just from the business side, but let's just say you're a team that's cruising along and you're just rolling, and you hit early February, and you're playing some of your best hockey, and then you don't play as a team. In fact, a lot of your guys are playing against each other for 2 weeks. It's actually even a little over 2 weeks this year, I think. You could totally just fall apart in the second half of the season. Now, the good teams will find a way to say, look, we have to get that momentum back. Everybody had this 2.5 week break. But it does. I mean, you're interrupting your season. I think of any other sport. NBA doesn't do that. Major League Baseball doesn't do that, although I don't think I would notice. The NFL doesn't do that. It's tough to take that break in the middle of everything going on. Now, sometimes it helps. Maybe, let's say Steven Stamkos is out for a couple months here. He gets those 2 weeks to come back. That's 2 more weeks of rest where he's not missing games for Tampa Bay. But
yeah, but I mean,
the trade-off is...
That's a rare occurrence.
This is why I think this is going to change, aside from the fact that the commissioner of the sport is saying he wouldn't mind if it changes. And to be fair, I mean... They've said that they're going to assess how things go this year and then kind of look at it in the future, and they've got time. But this year is in Russia. Last time they did it, it was in Canada. So there were strong hockey ties to where the Olympics were actually being held. Canadian players wanted to play for their country in their country. Russian players have been very vocal about it. Next year it's in South Korea, or next Olympics in 2018. So there's not that big hockey tie to it.
No, that's a really good point. And let's look at this season too. I mean, you look at teams in the Western Conference, man. It's a tough battle, and
Yeah.
you got a 22-day momentum killer. That was the thing too. That last year we had that shortened season, and I said it to people before this season started. I said, don't forget, this year you've got last year, this year, but in two parts.
Yeah.
You got a front half condensed, back half condensed. And the big beef last year with that condensed season was the fact that you couldn't really get into a rhythm because you didn't have that regular practice schedule. You didn't have the days off to rest, heal a couple of bruises. Well, you don't have it really that much this year. A little bit better, but you still got that condensed.
It's a good point because I don't think a lot of people realize this season's schedule is the games are closer together, and you're playing because you look at last year and you say it was just crazy. I mean, they're playing 4, sometimes 5 games a week. This year it's not like that.
It's
but
3 to 4. We're
not
playing
a normal year
right now. Teams are playing 3 to 4 games a week right now, so it's not that much dissimilar to what they went through. But this is just divided into two parts.
Well, let's look at the Western Conference right now because that's where the only teams that seem to be winning games are at the moment. And let's just look at some of the top teams. Let's say that starting tomorrow there was a 2.5-week break. I don't think it hurts Anaheim a ton. I think Phoenix has shown in the past they get better as the year goes on with their coaching staff. San Jose is loaded. But a team like Colorado that's 14-2 right now, can you imagine if they had to take a 2.5-week break right now? That could be it for them because they are, as good as they've looked, they're overachieving a bit.
They're overachieving a bit, and it's momentum, and you don't want to kill that momentum. That's my whole point. And that momentum doesn't just translate on the ice. It transcends over everything: marketing, television ratings, radio ratings, corporate sales. I mean, it's all tied into things that it just sports. I'm getting a little worked up right now, but sports is all about emotion. It's about passion, and you're into it, and you're like, now I got to wait around. What if you're not an Olympic fan?
Well, then there's something wrong with you.
But come on, there's guys that just don't want to turn on the Olympics.
Well, that's their problem. That is, but to help your argument a little bit, so the NHL season just keeps going, and there is no 2.5-week break. I can still watch the Olympics in South Korea in 2018, and it's going to be players that they would have to iron out the details, but it's probably going to be junior players that haven't signed an NFL contract, certainly, or an NHL contract, that are going to be in the NHL 2 years down the line. So you're getting almost a preview of the best young players down the line.
But that's still great hockey.
Yeah,
and I would watch that.
And I would watch that, and then I would watch the NHL games, and then I would go back to watching more Olympics. It's just fantastic. It's just more hockey.
Think about that. I mean, you would have a World Cup of hockey to kick off an NHL season. And then if it's an Olympic year, then you've got all these young guys playing because they're not NHL players, but you got all these young guys playing, still great hockey. So as a hockey fan, I'm good all season long. I mean, it's, to me as a hockey fan, that's a win-win.
Well, the best part too is, I don't know about you, but I have not yet used up my amateur eligibility. So this way, I at least still have a shot at playing for Team USA.
I'm done, dude. But I will watch hockey any day. I just watched a ton of hockey this weekend, and I was watching U12 hockey. And I'm sitting there freezing my butt off, but I sat and I watched, and I enjoyed every single minute of it.
There you go.
You're tuned into the Hockey Podcast. Follow us on Twitter @HockeyPodcast for even more hockey news. #DoIt.
Final segment, news and notes, and it should be noted that we have not mentioned the Philadelphia Flyers yet on this entire podcast.
Or
the Edmonton Oilers.
A Edmonton Oiler. We haven't mentioned him.
Well,
and I said
him.
I would not mention him, and I will not.
I should say this: Claude Giroux, first NHL goal first goal of this season. It feels like his first NHL goal. Scored his first goal this week. Only took him 16 games.
Tied with Mike Smith.
There you go. Oh boy, Ilya Bryzgalov is making his way to the Edmonton Oilers franchise. He's starting.
I giggled when I saw it. I saw the headline and I laughed.
Well, how can you not? First of all, just because it really is.
It's Briz.
I think I'm probably going to have a different viewpoint on this than most people, but I don't know that this is a bad deal for Edmonton.
Well, look, you and I have personally been around Briz, and we know what type of goaltender he is.
Regular season, he can be very good.
He's a very good goaltender. Kind of made a name for himself 2 seasons ago.
Yeah, whenever Philadelphia and the Rangers were on 24/7, he really kind of made a name for him. I mean, made a name for himself as a player a couple years before that with Phoenix. He was a Vezina finalist.
Yep.
But when Phoenix was like, all right, you can go ahead and leave and test the market, do whatever you want to do, Philadelphia was like, we're going to overpay you. That's actually what they said in the contract negotiations. And then it all blew up. But he made a name for himself on 24/7 nationally because he's an interesting character.
He's a very interesting character, and he's a very humorous character. But at the end of the day, he's a good goaltender.
He is. He wasn't great in Philadelphia.
He wasn't great. I could never, ever put my finger on why.
Well, look at Philadelphia now. He's not there. They're getting good goaltending, and they're still not doing so good.
Right.
So I think Briz was an easy player for the Flyers to kind of scapegoat and say, he's the problem. We'll buy him out. We'll give him 14 years worth of money. So they're giving him $1.63 million for each of the next 14 years. And I'm sure he was part of the problem because there in Philadelphia, he didn't seem to be able to handle the media the way, Phoenix media is different. Philadelphia, a whole different ballgame. He seemed to have problems with the GM. It didn't work in Philadelphia. In Edmonton, though, this is not a team that has Stanley Cup aspirations. They're signing him for 1 year. They're not doing well this season. I mean, their 10 points is the second worst record in all of hockey, and they're in the toughest division. So they're 21 points out of first place already in their division.
That hurts.
I mean, they got to do something.
But I don't know if they signed him for leadership or if
No, I'm going to go ahead and say
no.
not.
I wouldn't say that either.
I hope not.
That's kind of a rhetorical statement. I think he can settle things down between the pipes. As we're talking here,
Well, he was in a great situation in Phoenix.
Goals against, though, 75 so far on the season.
For Edmonton?
For Edmonton.
Yeah, no, they've got issues, and that's my point. He played very briefly in Anaheim, and that was the team that was on their way to the Stanley Cup. Played his best hockey in Phoenix, which is true, but he also had a great system in front of him and great defensemen in front of him. He goes to Philadelphia, he does not have a great system or great defensemen in front of him. And in Edmonton, it's going to be the same thing.
So a lot of young players in front of him.
You bring in a guy that could feasibly just go on a run for a couple weeks and rattle off. He could win 6 out of 7. He could have some games that he just takes over on his own. And Edmonton doesn't have that right now, so they need it.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, they're still going to have to put defense in front of him. And ultimately, he's only signed for a year, just like the other 18 goalies on their roster.
Maybe they're trying to give some young guys some confidence if he can, keep the puck out of the net and keep Edmonton in some games here. Maybe the team gets some team confidence rather than individual player confidence, and they build off of that. You've got right now Edmonton sitting with 3 goalies.
And hey, Richard Bachman there too, although I'm guessing he's out.
Yeah, but and the 3 I'm thinking of, Dubnyk, LaBarbera, Briz, they're all UFAs.
Yeah, this is all they're all signed through this year, so maybe this is a situation where Edmonton's saying, we've got, I don't know who's going to be the odd man out, but everything we're hearing is they're saying to Dubnyk and I would guess to Brizgalov, you've got the next 5 months to prove to us that you belong on this team next year.
Yeah, Jason's, the backup, and he was only signed for a year.
Yeah, so it's completely wide open there, and you look at this situation. If you look around the league, there's only 1 or 2 teams that it would make sense for them to sign Brizgalov. There are teams that are very good but don't have goaltending, but he's not going to come in and carry you through the playoffs. You have a team like this that has talent but can't seem to win games, and goaltending was certainly a problem. You bring him in, either he performs or maybe he pushes Devan Dubnyk to get better. Maybe he's one of those players that responds to that. Or maybe he goes there and it blows up in their face. It's $2 million. Edmonton's, paying him almost as much as Philadelphia, who's paying him $1.63 million this year not to play on their team.
I've said it 1,000 times. You got to start with the goaltender. Hopefully he can shore it up. And I think maybe he can give this team a little bit of confidence. I mean, goal differential of -27.
It's not ideal. Okay, so give me this. He had a hard time with the media pressure in Philadelphia.
I don't think, Canadian media is not much better.
I was going to say, he's never played for a Canadian team. Edmonton, they seem a little more laid back, at least in my experience dealing with them, than, say, Toronto or Montreal. Can you imagine Ilya Bryzgalov in Montreal? That needs to happen.
The Canadian media, though, they're going to expect that when they walk in that room, he talks to them.
They're going to
ask you a
expect
question.
Accountability. Yeah,
right.
They are. So
they just are.
We all win because you and I aren't direct Oilers fans. I don't have a problem with them, but we get
to see his quotes.
Yeah, and actually, there's one already came out that I almost forgot to give you. Somebody asked him about his time with the Philadelphia Flyers, and his quote was, "I just can tell you when the time right, I will write the book. You can read it then." If Ilya Bryzgalov ever writes a book, I will read it then.
Oh, I will read it too.
And every night. It's going to be amazing. I so hope that happens. On to 24/7, where he made quite a name for himself. It starts about 2 weeks. 2 weeks, I wish. Let's try 4 weeks. 4 weeks from this Saturday.
A month.
Should be 2 weeks. 2 weeks in my mind.
And we'll do, this is the official start of our 24/7 countdown.
Oh, yeah.
We have 1 month.
We have 32 days.
So it starts December 14th and 4 consecutive Saturdays starting on the 14th.
Great show. They have a lot of quality material to work with, but they do a great job with it too.
Yeah, I mean, HBO Productions is, you don't get much better than HBO. And the thing I love about it this year is it's 2 original 6 teams.
Yeah.
And I think
I could see you being into that, especially because one's Toronto.
One's Toronto, but I mean, it's just back to tradition.
Well, yeah. So if for some reason you haven't been on Earth for the last year, it's Detroit, Toronto, and this is my question to you.
Here's the thing. Before you give me any questions,
it's a good question. I forgot.
It's at the Big House.
Yeah, and it's gonna be packed.
It's going to be packed. It's going to be like 100,000 peoples. Peoples?
Many peoples.
That's like the internets.
All those peoples on the internets.
Thank you, George Bush.
Oh,
but
geez.
100,000 people sitting out in the cold watching a hockey game.
And me sitting in my house in the warmth watching that hockey game. Detroit, Toronto, historic rivals, now back in the same conference, same division. Makes it that much better. So now my question to you. Bryzgalov certainly stole the show a couple years ago when it was Philadelphia and the Rangers, but there were a lot of characters. It's the best thing you get with this show. People that aren't even hockey fans watch it because you get to know some of these guys off the ice. Who do you want to get to know from these two teams? Because
not Mike Babcock.
Because I contend Detroit, very businesslike, very successful. You can't knock them. Maybe they have a character on their team I don't know about, and we'll find out on the show. But I think the characters are going to be on Toronto.
I think?
I think it's going to be a guy like David Clarkson or Dave Bolland or...
Well, Bolland's out.
Yeah, that's the problem with him being hurt, but maybe he'll still be hanging around the team. Jonathan Bernier, I could see being interesting. Dion Phaneuf has a really hot wife. Maybe she'll be on the show occasionally. Colton Orr, I think, could be... Anytime you have a guy that's career is based on getting hit in the head and hitting in the head, he's going to have some interesting quotes. That's my early leader.
As you're talking, I'm going down the Red Wing roster, and I'm like,
They're just all so stoic.
Yeah, they're all, their coach is much like that, too. He's very all business. And
I mean, how great is it going to be if we find out...
Jimmy Howard.
Maybe. And, he's working maybe towards an Olympic spot at that point, too. How great is it going to be if, like, Pavel Datsyuk or Johan Franzen is just a comedian? I think my head would explode if Pavel Datsyuk is a locker room character. He just seems like he shows up, he scores a goal every night. That's his job. Seems like a nice guy.
That'd be funny, though.
But, so it's 24/7. It'll be
Franzen.
fantastic. Kevin Dineen will also be watching it from his home, unfortunately, for the former Florida coach.
Yeah, that's... what'd you think of that when you saw it?
I thought that it was kind of early. Look, Florida's lost 9 in a row.
Hey, we said that about Philadelphia.
That's true. Well,
that was 3 days.
Yeah, they obviously,
or 3 games or whatever it was.
At least they waited a little bit longer for Kevin Dineen, but he was this is only his third year as a coach. And so now you look at his coaching resume, he got to coach, 10 games this year, 11, maybe 12 games, and it wasn't going well, but they also don't have any players yet. Last year was a shortened season. So you're judging the bulk of his coaching resume on a shortened season.
Correct.
The year before, he took Florida to the playoffs. Where they hadn't been there in like 11, 12 years.
And recently, Florida's lost 3 in a row.
Well, recently they've lost 9 in a row. They've lost 3 in a row 3 times in a row. And look, Florida's got problems. I don't know that if you're rebuilding the team and there's indications that now Kevin Dineen's not going to be the first or last guy to go. I mean, they've already made changes before that. They're going to probably try and make some trades, and that's fine. But if he's there, if you're a coach in the middle of a rebuilding process, it just sucks. Because as they start to get good, it's going to be for another coach.
Well, and then I read a few quotes, and I go back to the Philadelphia of letting Laviolette go. That didn't roll off my tongue very well, but Dave Talon, the GM for Florida, said, well, I've been thinking about this. I'm like, really? Here we go again? You're going to wait till you're how many games into the season before you – like if you were thinking about it, can't we do it at the beginning?
Okay, but why this – I go back to that question. Why was he thinking about it? Kevin Dineen has been the coach for technically 1.5 years, and the first year they made the playoffs. They won the division, didn't they?
And then they're struggling. I understand they're struggling, but I just
Look, Dale Talon has done a great job wherever he's gone, and so I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, and he knows.
He's got a record, yes.
He knows what's going on in the background, obviously more than you and I do, about the Florida Panthers, and Florida did win the division 2 years ago. But I don't know. I don't know what you were expecting.
But here's another thing, though. I read a quote where Talon said, if you don't want to be here, we'll accommodate you.
Okay, well then that's different. I mean, if it was a case like that.
He made that quote, but, I mean, is that him just being Dave Talon, or was there actually something going on behind closed doors that none of us know?
Or maybe it's a message to the players. Who knows? I mean, again, Florida, 10 points on the year, second worst record in all of hockey, but I think a lot of people thought they'd have the worst record in all of hockey this year.
Yeah, I don't think people expected Florida to produce much anyways. So, but
I want to get us out
speaking of GMs.
Okay, well, good. Speaking of a GM. Oh, tomorrow.
GM meetings tomorrow. And guess what's at the top of the list?
Fighting.
Yep. Here we go again.
Anytime this quote comes out, I want to make sure I get it right. Brendan Shanahan, this was last week, quote, "I hate what Ray Emery did," unquote. Makes me feel like they're going to look at some rules.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it belongs where it is. I don't think there's as much fighting as there used to be.
Well, I don't think they're going to mess with real fighting. I think they're going to come up with something to tighten up that loophole that Ray Emery kind of exploited, where he's allowed to come down the ice and just attack Braden Holtby. I think they're going to do something.
It goes back to what we said last week. There has to be a decent, and the commissioner said it. If you knew you were going to be suspended for 10 games, do you do it?
Yeah.
No, you don't.
Well. Yeah, and so the league doesn't like that. He found a loophole and he made them look bad, and it's not anything they did wrong. You know, and it's common sense. Don't go down the ice and beat somebody up if they don't want to fight you and you're a goalie. Quickly, I think we should note 2 teams before we go. New York Rangers have won 3 in a row. They were down there with Philadelphia and those sorts of teams. They've kind of turned it around now. They're getting to play some home games. They're 9-8 on the year. And the San Jose Sharks, believe it or not, have lost 5 in a row.
Yeah, that's hard. You mentioned that off air before we started, and I went, huh?
Now, typical San Jose Sharks fashion, they've lost 5 in a row, and their record's still 10-2-5. 3 of those losses were in the shootout, 1 in overtime, and they still have 25 points, which would make them the best team in the Eastern Conference. That is it for episode 24. Join us next week as we check to see if Ilya Bryzgalov is still in the league.
Well, we kept our word. No Flyers talk, no Yakupov update, so next week we still won't do it as we keep the streak alive.
Quadru 1 goal plus whatever else happens in the next 7 days. Thanks for listening to the Hockey Podcast.